All right, now I have a split monitor display, so I don't know if that's why I can see, I moved everybody who's here over to the side, but I don't get to see chat. But I just have a few slides to go through, and I don't anticipate this being our hour-long meeting. Um, but would like to get some suggestions from those that are on the call of what you would like to see in potential meetings. And we did talk about a few weeks ago of creating a survey. We used to do a survey every year. I still haven't put that together, but I would like to get that together prior to the next meeting, and to a larger group to find out what are the interests of folks. We've done that in the past, and that allowed us to focus on different topics. You know, a couple of years ago, the results were building out open science pillars and some discussions on those. We had a workshop at one of the ESIP meetings and really thought about how to expand on that. And in that time, the Open Science Help Desk that actually wasn't a cluster, and there's been some like work together with both clusters. So I think maybe this year will be an opportunity to expand it into something that folks might be interested in. One of the topics that was always a big, uh, maybe not issue, but a hot topic was on open data repositories. And especially over the last year and a half, with changes in government, what's going on in different agencies, data repositories have been a topic of discussion, but I'm not sure if that's what folks want to start to talk about or not. All right, so I'll go through the Open Science Cluster at ESIP, or sorry, the what we saw at EGU. Let me just see, it's not letting me get there. Here we go. So EGU itself is the European Geophysical Union, and for those, are there any on the call that have been to this event before? Not sure. No. Well, it's very similar to EGU, only it's the European version. This year marked 20 years of it being held in Vienna, Austria. So although it's called the European Geophysical Union, it really is always in Vienna, or has been for the last 20 years. And it is similar to EGU in that there's a lot of scientific groups coming together. The one that speaks mostly to folks who would most likely be on this call, especially if we're thinking about earth sciences, is ESSI, which stands for Earth and Space Science Informatics. And this team or division is quite large. They normally have about 10 different breakout sessions. And in those, there's a lot of open science sessions. Now, I have 50 plus sessions in total. Actually, if you do a search through the program at EGU, there's about 50 of them that have something to do with open science in it. So it's still a strong theme at this event, as it is at EGU as well. This little snippet here is just a screen capture from doing a search on a lot of the papers. And I have that search created in a document that I will add to our cluster meeting for folks, because you can go and click on any one of these and learn more about the topic. And in some cases, some of them are recorded. Sometimes they have more information about each of the sessions. So it varies from session to session as to what kind of resources are available associated with that topic. So the event was in May 3rd to the 8th. And they had over, well, you can see the numbers here, 22,000 plus people in attendance. So that's not just in person and virtual. They actually had that many attend, and covering 125 countries. So it's not as large as EGU. I think the largest EGU I've seen to date was around 2,700 folks, and that was just a couple of years ago. And that one's starting to creep up again. But nonetheless, this is still a large program, and it is international. You get folks from every, well, 125 different countries. So the help desk had its appearance again. So that's a joint program between ESIP, EGU, and AGU. So for example, EGU would give the space available, the booth space, as an in-kind contribution to the data help desk. So it's really an open science data help desk is how they frame it. And it's usually on the lower level, which is right across from European Space Agency and NASA. Usually when NASA is there, they were not there this year, but it's also EGU and a lot of the PICO spots. Now, PICO spots at EGU there's a stage and then there's a series of computer portals. So this, well, like with monitors and the stage, each presenter is usually a 90-minute session. Each presenter gets 2 minutes to talk. And then they go after the 2 minutes, usually about 9 presenters. It's just about 30 minutes of presentations. And then the rest of the time is over at these individual portals where every presenter has their laptop connected to a large screen and they can go into a bit more detail on their project. I usually chair a session. And this year was on open science or open geospatial tools. And I have a link to that for later. But at any rate, the help desk it's every year it's in the same lower level floor. People are used to it. They're getting lots of topics. This year they did something a little bit different. They had a featured demonstration every day. And these are some of the topics that they had. So dedicated topics where they give a little presentation on. And they had information about that at their desk. And, many folks attended those sessions. So I've included here, this is the data help desk cluster. So just like this is an open science cluster, there's also this help desk cluster that there's a lot of similarities. Or those who are interested in this cluster tend to be interested in this as well. And many folks actually volunteer at the help desk. I didn't get a chance to do it this year. I was too busy, but I've done it in the past. And this data help desk also will appear at GSA and it's at AGU as well. I'm not sure if it's at other events as well, but it really allows folks who are in the field of working with earth sciences data to ask questions and how to make data more open and accessible, as well as their research. So it's a valuable resource. Overall at EGU, every year when I go there, I'm always interested in the overarching themes of open science. What are the trends? Where are people starting to submit papers, wanting to have discussions on? Those of you who were with us last year might have recalled we talked a little bit about there was open data repository. There was a whole 4-hour full afternoon session on that last year. And that had a lot of heated discussions because there was repositories opening up in many different areas with perhaps maybe not as much consistency or lessons learned from one topic to the next. Whereas this year we saw a little more cohesiveness. And I think that's an effort of researchers and commercial companies and professionals just coming more together to help each other out to make data open and more accessible. So 4 themes, I would say that really out of all the sessions that were on open science were on the open science infrastructure and fair data practices. Fair is that's been rooted for a good 10 years now. I think it is coming up on a decade, and we're not moving away from that. We're moving more and more toward that. So that's pretty incredible. Then we had open software, reproducibility, and community tooling. And I think we're seeing a lot in the world of open science, where so many researchers are now able to collaborate more, strong presence on GitHub, we're seeing more connectiveness and more working together with tools, APIs, and just sharing so that we're progressing faster in the space. And then community building, publishing, and also one of the focuses, what they were trying to do with EGU this year, because we had in 2026, there was a quite a bit of different leadership coming in across the EGU divisions. And so they're really in 2026 really looking for feedback from the user community on how they want to grow and progress in 2027 and the years beyond. So there was a lot of opportunity for folks to weigh in, and you didn't actually even have to be at the events to do that. You can still do that online if anybody's interested in contributing. And then, of course, well, I think all of us have seen in the world today, AI is everywhere. Cloud, we're moving to the cloud more and more. So these also was a large theme happening at the event. So I have a slide on each one of them that just talks a little bit about some of the presentations and things that we were seeing or sessions, just to give you an idea of trends and whatnot. So with open science infrastructure and fair data, so looking at there's three main sessions. So this ESSI, which I told you before, that's really the Earth's space and science, or Earth sciences and space informatics. And they have a number of sessions or divisions within, I think they might have 8. And each one of those, within each one of those divisions, they have multiple sessions. So what you're seeing here, 3 is one of the divisions and 3.1 is one session. We have 3.2, but then we also have 2.6. So there's a number of sessions within each of the divisions within informatics. And so I pulled out the ones that would speak to us. So from fair data to collaborative science. So we're seeing there's quite a few sessions, and one in particular on research data infrastructures and virtual research environments for Earth system science. And this particular session came to be because of EGU 25, where there was that large full afternoon session on open data repository. So every year, the thing I like about EGU is that they build on things that happened the year before, sometimes growing them, sometimes breaking them out into other groups, but always having focused discussions. And EGU over the years has been building in volumes of people attending. So they're getting larger engagement, which is great, because probably 5 years ago in EG, well, yeah, maybe 2021. Yeah, that's 5 years ago. Open science wasn't nearly as big as what we're seeing today. So that's a really great movement in the space. So that's great. Then another session was on principles to practice. So, and a lot of these sessions were 2 to 4 hours in length with breaks in between. This one was co-sponsored by EGU. So there was a large contingency of EGU. Many of you probably know Shelley Stahl, who's president of the VP, I think, of Open Science at EGU. She was there with a lot of other colleagues, also helping at the help desk, as well as speaking at many of these panel type sessions on open science. So it was nice to see the involvement still going on in that space and the joint between the American side and the European side. And then it is a European conference, so it's shaping the future of European landscape for Earth system science. This session, along with bridging Earth science research through integrated infrastructures and virtual research environments, these two, they're really looking to really embrace open science. There was a strong push that there needs to be a virtual component always, because not everybody can be there physically. And so bridging the gaps and looking at user groups and working groups to be able to have an expanded audience. In the past, like EGU, I think about 4 years ago, had a very large virtual presence, and probably half were in person and half were virtual. They've tried to carry some of that each year. Obviously, it gets a little less and less with more and more folks having the opportunity to be in person, but still probably maybe about 2,000 or just under 3,000 were available, could join in virtually as well. And some of the sessions that are highlighted, ones I've talked about, some of them do have some recordings or additional information available for folks to come and look at it later to get an insight as to what's been going on.
Lorraine,
Yes.
Althea, I know you can't see the chat, and Althea had a question.
Okay.
Were there any open science sessions, conversations about how generative AI fits into open science workflows and how to make that process transparent and reproducible?
Um, let's see. I have something on the AI side. Oops. Right here. I This one might have been here joining to shape the open science cloud. There's a large infrastructure. Many of you are probably aware the European Commission has a large, has always been open and accessible, and they're looking to put more and more things in the cloud so that anybody, any researcher could have access. So I didn't sit in on many of the AI ones. One of my colleagues did. There's heated discussions about AI agents. There's also there's themes about how to start to control. Maybe control is not the right word, but monitor or put more of a human approach into AI rather than just having AI spit something out. So there was a discussion. I don't know if I have it here. Let me see. No, it wasn't. Well, it's one I should have probably put on, but I sat in a discussion where it was about using AI for coding. Now that's not an issue. Many folks didn't seem to have any issues with that, and in fact talked about the ways for it to be advancing science quicker because it's like building blocks. Somebody can produce something and then somebody else can take it and start to work on it. So there's some positive components of that. But where I saw AI being a little contentious or problematic is in the research methodology in and of itself. And there was a growing fear that researchers would not really be well grounded in the research process and the methodology if it's all being driven by AI. And so even how to be able to figure out a way to ensure that the students were having more of the human input to produce a research topic or a project that wasn't fully driven by AI. So I'm sure that doesn't answer your question entirely, but I would suggest looking at on the EGU website and the programming to search specifically for that. I sat in a few sessions where, GitHub, there's pros and cons to GitHub. Europeans are, they'll use it to some degree, but there's questions about who's really responsible for what is being put there. And a lot of the research not a lot, but I sat in on many sessions where, as we are today, there's many folks coming into a research project. So there's a lot of collaboration and a lot of tooling that is going across divisions. And I'm seeing more integration and more building, whether it's all reproducible. Many are trying to, definitely put together a whole process that it can be reproducible. But there was discussions on, there's so many parameters to actually really drive reproducibility that some found success and others were saying it's difficult to do. In my experience, what I've seen in many cases is that, yeah, I think you can get so far, and then a user can take a workflow, whether it's a notebook or something like that, and start to build on. And but there's never, I mean, just to just be reproducible per se, I think is a challenge, and that's what many of the topics were about. So I think there's still, I mean, if you think about a methodology, if you're using a notebook or a set of code, and then you build on that, you are reproducing things in a way that you're utilizing existing methods that have been in place, and then just adding maybe some of your own insight to it, or parameters, or different work environment. And, it's coming out to be a good way that you are able to reuse things. So reuse was being used more than reproduce. And that I can understand as well, right? Just because of what I just said. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that will give you a little idea. Now, on this joining forces to shape a European open science cloud. This is large. There's a lot of stakeholders involved, and there's a lot of governance associated with this as well. Europe, on the European side, the European Commission, if you think about Copernicus program, which has a lot of the space data sets that are freely available, and they've gone that model, which was modeled after Landsat, once Landsat became open and available to everybody. And they continue to go even further by having these like an open science cloud for folks to be able to work with and use and deposit their data there. I don't fully understand how it all gets funded and who keeps it going. I just know over the last maybe a couple of years, we've seen some challenges with data repositories, with changes in government, and how to ensure that we have a consistent or continuous record of information in a repository that we don't lose sight of, or not, that we can't access it. Another large push, and I see that on the US side too, is foundation models and embeddings for earth sciences. And they're using AI to build a lot of those out. And that's becoming a very hot topic. I didn't research exactly how many sessions were on foundation models and embeddings. I know NASA is really huge on that right now. But that's a real growing force, and AI is required to help implement that. And they're moving towards open data formats so that everybody can have access to it, almost building digital twins, if you like. Last year, environmental digital twins was very large, especially in the European Open Science Cloud, and that continues to grow. And many organizations and entities, both from the research and commercial side, are inputting data into those environments. I'm just going to go back a bit because I skipped over. I don't know if anybody, I think I can see, no, I don't see the chat. I don't know if I have any more questions. So somebody will let me know if I do.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay.
Josh, they're just sharing some things, but we can, yeah.
Okay, I can look at that later, and maybe I could provide comments to whatever is being put in there, because I have a lot of insight or intel on this space. I go with Esri. We have a booth for EGU, and I have my open science or my open source team with me, and our remotely sense and AI gurus with us. And so we really tried to get a sense of what is of interest to folks. So open software, obviously, very big, and the reproducibility and community working together. And that's growing at EGU. About 5 or 6 years ago. That was they wanted maybe more community involvement, but it wasn't happening. But now it's everywhere. So everybody does want to share the whole concept of publishing parts of your research in advance of a full paper and whatnot. That's all now, everybody is doing it. So that's very fantastic to see that. Now at EGU, a lot of the sessions and whatnot are really geoscience, so earth sciences, atmospheric, and we'll see they're all looking at tooling options. They're always working with large volumes of earth observations and figuring out ways to be able to work in the cloud and distribute that data. So that's always looking to the community to learn more. This session, there was a short course, and normally they don't do short courses at, well, I didn't think they did, at EGU, but they're starting, there was quite a few this year. And it was starting to educate users on how to use and work with data workflows for reproducible analytics. Now, at AGU, many of you are probably aware, there's an AGU Central, and they have like an actual theater for talks and workshops. That's going all throughout AGU. Whereas EGU, it's more about going in and sitting on people's sessions or half-day things and have discussions. But now they're starting to have these short courses, which I think is beneficial for the user community. This session here, now this is outside the informatics session, but we're seeing more information about data repositories. And so not really classified as open science, but it's a session where they're starting to look at how to work with open data repositories. And this session here, this is another PICO session. PICO sessions, as I explained earlier, are those 90-minute sessions where they have monitors for about, let's say, an hour and a half or so in front of a digital monitor to show their work. So advancing geoscience research and visualization through user-friendly software. And in many cases, we had open source combined with commercial software and creating APIs. There's still a fair number of programmers. There's also non-programmers that are looking to do research as well. So the group is growing on both sides. I talked a little bit about this. I don't think there was anything that I missed. I'm just reading. No. And then the last one, always big on this side, is about building communities to collaborate and do research as well as publishing. You know, they have a lot of these great debate sessions. One of them last year was on open data repositories. And how do we make sure that they stay open and they're still supported in lieu of governments changing? So this year we had the future of scientific publishing. That was a very interesting discussion because if we look today, many of the scientific journals have some form of open to it. Where users can still publish the research, even partial research. You can get a DOI and make it available, your code and everything for users. But I found this to be, I can't remember how long it was, but it was a certain amount of time dedicated to it. Talking about, do we need scientific journals? That's very provocative title, if you ask me, especially given we've been publishing for so many decades. I can't imagine it going away. No conclusions or anything. It was just really a community-wide discussion. And in the end, it was really about having more journals, having open access so that authors could publish. Because there's always a quota of how much they need to be able to publish so much, especially if we think about university world to get tenure and that sort of thing. So making things a little bit more accessible, because in a lot of cases, the journals are still pretty expensive to actually publish in. Always career paths, and then data in turbulent times. So this is still following on from last year, about data repositories. And there's a lot of different uh, groups now. Kirsten and Jens, Kirsten is the president of ESSI, so that informatics division. Jens Klump was the president of it previous, so he's still on, but they're the ones who are leading very good sessions on open data repositories and how to sustain them. And yeah, so I think that's it for, how do I stop sharing? Oh, I see. Okay. So that just gives you a summary of, the open science themes across ESIP. And when you think about it, 22,000 plus students, the bulk of which are trying to, their mandate. Well, they're not all students. There's early career and young professionals. More than, I think 60% are something like 58% were early career. And what that means is how the EGU defines it is they've graduated from undergrad to master's and even sometimes PhD, and they're actually working in a profession where their research is led them to this profession. So 60% in the professional world. And they are, even in where they're working, they're still looking to work with open repositories, reproducible results, and building on what others are doing. So still very positive. Okay, so let me see, what do we have in here? I see Joshua put in a proposal to continue the NASA TOPS Open Science Project. Oh, very nice. Can you comment on that, Joshua? Is that still going on?
Um, we just a couple months ago finished our first. We had like a no cost extension. So most of the top stuff ended last year.
Right,
Um,
yeah.
but we just finally released whatever that means. We have a large Git with all sorts of lessons and modules surrounding different earth science themes that demonstrate how to do open science and earth sciences. So they have an extension you can put in for an extension through the HPOS RFP that they put out, but they only did like two of them after the election. But so normally we show code and teach earth science and show use cases about your world and agriculture and sociology and all sorts of different things. But we just propose to use to show people how to write lessons that show people how to do earth science stuff with Gen AI, because we were making all the lessons and developing all the code with Gen AI, and we're getting pretty good about best practices, how to kick out the curriculum and open science code pretty fast. So we proposed to show people how to do that in the way that we were doing it. And it was very well received, but they didn't have any money, so it didn't go much further. But when the next HPOS comes around, F7, there's a variety of NASA open science calls that are kind of similar. Some are for extensions of existing products. There's all sorts of varieties. So when it comes around again, we'll probably put it out. So we have a bunch of lessons like these I just put in chat, and they're very kind of like textbook curriculum kind of stuff with code in it. But we would propose to do similar stuff, but demonstrating people how to use Claude and skills and memory and all these different Gen AI techniques to create reliable code. And a lot of the stuff when we proposed isn't really big of an issue anymore. Like they don't hallucinate very much anymore, or they don't, they don't lie to you when you have it search a paper and find a citation. They've gone out of their way to fix a lot of that stuff in the past 6 months, all of the major chatbot guys. But it's
Mhm.
also possible that we're just really good at talking to Gen AI and the way that we work with it so that we're able to more reliably produce results, which would, I guess, be part of the benefit of developing more content like this, where maybe it's not much better, but we're better and we know how to talk to it. So we use it all the time for all sorts of open science or internal research. Um, and so we use it so much and seem to have a pretty good flow. And I can kick out like 2 weeks worth of work in a day that I used to do 3 years ago. So it's wild. So
Yeah,
we usually don't try to hoard that stuff. We just try to get a grant that would allow us to make money while showing other people how to do it and then move on to the next thing. So that's kind of what we're thinking about in regards to that topic of demonstrating Gen AI workflows for other scientists and let them know how we're using it. So I know last year at the ESIP meeting, there were a lot of people who were interested, and a good amount of people just don't really know the best ways to
yeah,
interact with AI in terms of, federal, they're constantly trying to get data off Earth data or NIDIS data or NOAA data, just using federal open data. And how do we not spend our time banging my head against the wall with this chatbot? Because if you know how to talk to them, the level of work you can get done in the short amount of time is just obscene. So,
yeah, yeah. We're seeing that on the commercial side as well. Like we're working a lot with AI agents, and so it's system talking to system, and it just blows your mind how fast everything can go. And you have a lot of testers on the other end to make sure that, okay, as you say, does this make sense? Are we doing the right thing? But yeah, and I was just at digital mapping techniques group, which is the state geologic surveys came together in Maine, and they're starting to try to use AI to help with downscaling of geologic maps, for example. So if you can imagine a geologic map that has all the different lithological units, and if the 1 to 200,000 scale has, I don't know, let's say 50, and we want to go down to um, 1 to 24,000 scale, then we can only really fit 24 or something, or vice versa. Actually, I got those backwards, but you would have less at the 1 to 100,000 scale and more at the 1 to 24,000. And they were just really trying to sample this information to still have it valid from a geologic standpoint. And can I help it? And a lot of iterative processes and what was discovered, which I'm not surprised about, but I'm sure will improve over time, is it still requires a lot of geologic information or knowledge to be able to say, okay, yeah, that's right, that's not quite right, that sort of thing. But training it over time would be usable. But they're also using like comparing all the different AI like Claude and ChatGPT and even Copilot and to see what kind of results each of those come out with and compare. And for different types of scales of data, different ones were um, doing better. And sometimes you need a combination of many, but just the process of trying to do it is worth sharing because folks, if they don't know, if they've not seen someone else do it, there's kind of this unknown, and not everyone's an expert working in that space. But like with you folks, if you have expertise, as you say, you've been using it for a while, and you may be able to speak to it more. That's beneficial because then you would build up trusts associated with that, and then being able to transfer that knowledge, I think is beneficial. Maybe sometime we can get you to give um, I don't know what you'd be interested in, but a half-hour talk on training or programming. I don't know. Maybe we could look at some of the links that you put there and see what might be a topic that you could
yeah, our
be.
last open science was very, we developed a curriculum, but we ran workshops either online or at ESIP meetings. We did one in Nashville. We've done on my EGU. So it was a lot of, we work with a capstone class so they can
Mhm.
create their own own
Oh, yeah.
submissions and open science submissions, and so it was a little more fleshed out than just those types of lessons and stuff and all the modules that we do. But yeah,
Mhm.
so we try to build up a context around it. Of course, that stuff eats up budget a lot. It's a lot
Yeah, I'm
cheaper
sure.
for me to just make one lesson after another rather than to go to wherever Asheville and set up a workshop. But yeah, like I said, and hopefully I'm going to expand it to our my son's school. They do Montessori, and they have like computer stuff you can teach. So we're going to try to
Mhm.
downscale some of the lessons to just very simple things for 13-year-olds, stuff like that. So we try to focus. The focus is the GitHub and the NASA curriculum that they wanted to develop, but we try to flesh out around it as much as possible with workshops and lessons and in class stuff.
Mhm. That's fantastic.
I was gonna make a couple of comments too about the repository resilience.
Mhm.
There was a lot of work led by the Sustainable Data Management Cluster. They developed these repository crisis scorecards that folks were using to assess resilience. And the Sloan Foundation funded like a short project for them to kind of explore that work a little bit more. And that output of that work is going to be coming out within the next month or so. But the reason I'm bringing this forward is that the chair of the State Sustainable Data Management Cluster, Joseph Gum, had to step away. And we're currently looking for a chair for that work. And so you had talked a little bit, Lorraine, about there being some potential overlap with some of the work
Mhm.
that the different clusters are doing.
Mhm.
Um, they're currently kind of all co-working on some publications around some of the work they did with the repository resilience, but I've kind of just been trying to facilitate their work on this kind of wrapping up some of what they did under Joseph's leadership. But I just kind of wanted to make y'all aware of that because there could be some potential there to combine efforts if that's it's
Mhm.
definitely an area that seems to be getting a lot of traction, like you were saying, with everything that happened last year.
Mhm.
And so uh, yeah, we'll be sharing out the results from that Sloan work here in the next month or so. And I'm thinking there could be some opportunities like what are the next steps after this
Right.
with
Yeah.
that cluster not having that leadership right now. I mean, there's
Yeah.
people working and doing stuff, but no one's really been able to step into that chair role. So anyway, I'm just bringing that forward if that's something
Right.
of a lot of interest to y'all, that we could maybe talk through some of that together at some point.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, because I'm seeing that's like one of the major themes at what was at AGU and at EGU the last couple of years, and especially with government changes. Um, yeah, it's becoming a challenge, and folks are there's all kinds of different ideas of on how to solve, but continued discussions around it are needed and to keep it going. Because if not, then I think we'll be in a phase where it will become an issue and with no answer. But if we think about like just even the open um, publishing about 10 years ago, just the talk about open publishing for journals to have some way to have a component that researchers didn't have to pay to publish, that kind of thing, and where users didn't have to pay to access was such a heated I've been in, especially on the European side, been in discussions where it was not so friendly. It was very interesting. And then each year they grow and grow. And now it's this year, 10 years later, it's about, well, do we even really need to have open publishing? Can't we just have things out on the web anywhere? That sort of thing, which was quite a change from the initial discussions. And so it's hopeful with these larger discussions about the repositories and what has changed in government. Yeah, we do have to look at sustainability. Who's going to cover the costs associated with these? And how do we ensure that the data access is still always available? to the end users, so that we're not back in the time where you had to pay, I think it was $1,000 for a Landsat scene, and this might have been, I don't know, 15 years ago or 20 years. I don't really know, but to do a research, you could only really have one scene because you had to buy the data if you couldn't get funded to purchase it. And we now know the benefit of open data, and the whole Copernicus satellite program has made that, had followed on with that. And now we see every satellite deployment since then be open data, but getting access to that is still important. Just looking to see, I see this
In
on
the chat, yeah, I just shared, since y'all are talking a little bit about AI, a lot of the things that have been discussed are conversations happening all across the community, even the ethics associated with its use and that kind of thing. So the July meeting is going to be very AI heavy, I would say, the
right.
content. So I just shared the link to the proposals that came in. If you wanted to look at the session descriptions, or if you're just curious. But the full schedule will be out soon, probably Monday of next week,
Mhm.
to
Okay.
find out when things are happening. But I also shared the link to the July meeting. Early registration is open until June 19th. So if anyone's interested in attending.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'll be we're going to sponsor that event. I think it's going through, I don't know, maybe the paperwork's finished. I'm not quite sure. I have another team member who works on that for me, but yeah. For those who have not been before, the in-person meetings are very, I will say, very intense in that it's not, you don't just show up and sit in on sessions. It's very participation oriented. There's a lot of discussions, you learn a lot, you meet a lot of contacts, you join alliances. There's a lot of benefit from these meetings. And you really do get to see a whole landscape of trends that are happening in and around earth science, and just an overall beneficial meeting, more so than just sitting in on papers being presented. So I hope to see everybody there.